All right, so we are live now. Hello, everyone. I'm glad to welcome you all to our session. First of all, why this session? As we all know, remote work becomes more relevant, especially within COVID-19, and even beforehand, is getting more and more important. And well, I think maybe we just wait just 1 minute until everyone is there, and then we jump into getting the introduction. Then I say hello, everyone. Great, very international. That sounds good. Cool. So, let's see. Filling up. That's good. All right. Then, once more, welcome everyone. Remote work within a finance works. So, from a finance perspective, I'm glad to welcome my two colleagues. So, on one end, Pedro, VP of Finance of Remote, a company enabling international payroll, benefits, taxes, and compliance for businesses of all sizes, and Julian, CFO at Heetch, which is an Uber-like company, and of course, a very, very important fact, they are working since the foundation, since 2013, remote first. So, of course, already having a lot of challenges regarding this, and of course, how to get around with that, how to get this done, and yeah, I would like to kick it off a little bit. With one question. So, why do you think is setting up a remote company so important, especially at the moment, and why it could be a competitive advantage? So please go ahead. Julio, you want to start?
Oh, okay. Shall I start? Since the beginning, our founders at Heetch, since 2013, decided to have a remote-first company, especially for the tech people. Since we are recruiting a lot of iOS developers, Android developers, and so on, it's a very tense market, very competitive. And so we wanted to have the biggest talent pool possible. So we just defined a big time zone, going from the Atlantic Sea to the almost Russia, and saying, okay, everybody's available there, maybe a good candidate for us until South Africa. And it allowed us to have the best ones in our field at I would say, acceptable price sometimes. And it has been a great advantage since the beginning. And of course, when the COVID went to disrupt everything like 1 year and a half ago, well, at least we were already ready and have all the way of working, all tools to still work efficiently in that in this remote world. So it has been very useful since the beginning to enlarge the talent pool.
So exactly. So the thing. So just to enlarge, to ensure that all the positions are getting filled. So very, very important thing, of course. So Pedro, what would be your points regarding that?
No, I think this talent pool access is super relevant. Why do you have to limit your hiring to your postcode? Which also accelerates speed to market. You can go into new markets much faster. You can go into new products much faster because you can access a talent pool that you couldn't do it locally. And it's also super connected with remote vision of enabling anyone from anywhere to be hired and have a good job. So we also want to make sure that folks at Remote have that opportunity, not only internally, but what we enable globally. And that can have a massive impact socially and economically.
Yeah, and we all see that in the past months, and even, like Jean already pointed out, so started with product and engineering people, but getting more and more even into other roles within back offices, office functions, and then we have a war of talent here.
Maybe I could add something on that. Mm-hmm. Actually, we started with the tech people because it was the most obvious, the easiest guys to work with remotely and so on, and because we had this kind of challenge of recruiting the best guys and to find guys available. And actually, we used it since we discovered how to play with that. We used it also as a retainer. I just can give you an example. I had a girl in my team who was just office manager in charge of finance processes and so on. And she asked me, "Oh, Julian, would it be okay if next month I work from Bali?" At the first time I say, what are you saying exactly? Well, actually, she did it twice. There was a small group of the company saying, okay, we are going to rent a big Airbnb in Bali, and we are working from there during 1 month. And it acts as a key retainer, because in which company it will be okay to say, yeah, next month I'm going to work from Bali, next to the swimming pool. This is the first point. And the second point, we took advantage of this knowledge of how to deal with that. We have, of course, a customer support at Heetch to deal with all things happening with passengers, drivers, and so on. And we were struggling to find a good way to have a 24 hours per day service, 7 days a week, and so on, with good people, well-trained, good French speakers, and so on. And at the end, what we decided to do is to train people in France and then to send them as remote workers in Mexico and in Bali, so they could do the 3 shifts of the day. But since it's day shift for them, but really good people, not people, Indonesian people not speaking French, but really French people trained here and sent there because they wanted to have this experience abroad during 1 or 2 years. So we use this knowledge how to deal with remote people in other fields than just tech people.
Great. Very, very good said, and it brings me already to the problems, or to the things, to the challenges you need to cover, especially when you set up a remote workforce. So how to get the people on board and how to ensure that they are all connected. I think is a topic which a lot of people are at the moment try to start to solve, and how to get how to find the right solution for that. And maybe it would be great to hear your thoughts, and of course got your experience.
Yeah, the challenges of hiring internationally are immense. Compliance, regulatory, benefits. So it's super localized, and which has been a great obstacle for you to grow international teams. Historically, these teams were being grown as contractors with very limited security or social security and benefits compared to your other employees. But that is changing, and you have solutions out there that are enabling this global hiring and in a compliant manner. Because in the end, and I think Julian touched a critical point, is not talent acquisition, but also talent retention. And what you want to ensure is that your talent has the best benefits, that they're not concerned with any risks of taxation or extra taxation, or being able to have a secure job and not facing the risks of any day a contract can terminate and that's the last invoice that they can send. And solutions like these are enabling companies like Heetch and others to really hire internationally and retain that talent.
Mm-hmm.
Roman, you were talking about retainer, and you were talking maybe about the way you work day to day with remote people, right?
Yeah, exactly. So how to ensure that that you still are in touch and that they are all feel connected on the one hand. And I just had a good question which is fitting to that. So by the way, first of all, please everyone state questions. I will always try to get it into discussion once it fits. I will just pick it up. So, and there was one question of Ifti. Sorry, I hope I get the name correctly. So very interesting, the Bali example. So so for young digital natives, that's of course clear. So for one people, but how about people, which families, and how do you engage with them in order to have them? Yeah, thank you. How do you engage with those people who want to be more remote and maybe even more flexible?
Well, actually, yeah, this example of Bali was for a girl who has no kids. And so she was very free to move wherever she wants and so on. So that was a kind of benefit, which was very appreciated by her. And for people with families, actually, we had one guy, a tech guy, who was working remotely, a French guy working remotely in France, but not at the Paris office. And he did a trip around the world during 1 year and working, arranging the working shifts. So he did that with his wife and kids. So, if the guys want, there is not really a problem. It's about your personal organization. So yes, we had one guy, one developer who traveled during 1 year around the world, and just, he just fit the good working hours to be able to still work with his mates, and that's all. But on the other side, when you are talking about tech people, usually they are not, except these guys, they are not willing to travel so much. They want to work from the place they live with their family, and which may be better than a Paris area or great city because you have countryside, because you have animals and so on. And for these guys, it's not about moving every week and so on. It's more about how can I enjoy a very good place to live while having a very interesting job with good pay slip and so on. And I guess with this, when we address it, we have many people living in south of France, small cities, enjoying the life, enjoying their jobs. I think this is the big value we bring to them when it comes to remote work.
Makes totally sense. And already a question which we already had within our on our agenda. So is how to keep the culture in the business. So how to keep it up, keep the people connected to your company. That we had the question already 2 times, one by FD, one by Christian. So this is already and it's already within our within the structure, and how to engage and how to keep them engaged with with the company values, and even and especially when you hire them already remotely. I mean, Pedro, for you, it might be as you grow so heavily internationally. I mean, I think this is very important, especially for such a hypergrowth company you're working with as Remote is. So maybe you could share some insights on how do you how to deal with this.
Yeah, definitely keeping the spirits up. It's relevant when we've grown in a year from 30 folks to 450. All remote and spread around the world. Our hiring is very focused on values and more than on cultural alignment. We invest heavily in cultural diversity and hiring towards our values. And some of our values include ownership and having that capacity of owning and working independently and being a manager of one. And being able to enable yourself is critical. But we have a lot of initiatives to bring teams together, not in real life. We are still not promoting these given the current world situation. And we have folks from anywhere in the world, so some places are still more affected. But we have, and it has been evolving, the strategies that we use to connect. Initially, we had a daily call with the question of the day, like, what's your favorite ice cream flavor? Today, we do this more focus on different teams where we do team meetings, team initiatives. We have a day where we play games all together. We continue having a weekly all hands, which also has evolved massively from a lot of folks putting their own agenda to different departments presenting what they are doing so that folks can feel more connected. And a critical way for us to continue maintaining the spirits up and folks highly motivated and continuing being super ambitious is transparency. If everyone knows what everyone is doing, if you know how your work is impacting other folks, this makes a huge difference, and we all benefit from it. So you need to work on it, but you can do it, and but it needs to be on purpose, and you need to commit to it to make sure it actually works.
Okay.
Yeah, I definitely agree with Pedro, specifically on that last point about transparency, because when you're remote, you have no contact other than the one who are scheduled, the people you connect with. You do not have this small talk at the coffee machine or whatever. So you do not have this fuzzy atmosphere of the company. So it's very important to work on it specifically. So technically in our company, we have this weekly meeting where we share all the figures, the business figures of the last week, and it's commented by the founder, the CEO and founder. We have this monthly meeting of like almost 2 hours when it's a big review of the strategy, the big events of what happened in the company, in our markets, and what we're doing in the new markets and so on. And we have also, Q&A session with founders, with small groups, maximum 20, 30 people. So they can really ask if they have some questions directly to the founder. And we also organize in real life events. Once a year, a seminary when everybody meets and have some drinks and so on. So it's a lot of fun, and also and more especially for tech people, they are working at a small what we call squads. There is like 2 iOS developers, 2 Android developers, 2 backend, 1 front end, and things like that on a specific bunch of functionalities of the application. Maybe for the onboarding of the drivers, or another team specifically on how a ride works and so on. And what they do every quarter or every semester, they do a retreat. So they rent an Airbnb in a city in Europe, and they go all there and they live together for 1 week and work together and so on. And this is the core team, people working all the time together, depending on each other. They have to trust each other. So we do this quite often, and of course it's a cost, but I guess it's just you have to do it if you want to have it working efficiently.
I think. What do you think about? So thank you very much for those insights already for the ritual. So what do you think about this overall setup? And I mean, you mentioned, Pedro, you already mentioned like you hire by values and especially ensure that the people are connected already. So I think this whole remote work has brings new challenges, especially within the recruiting process, but of course even within the internal setup. What do you think about this? So how to ensure that and how to cover that? And what is crucial for keeping that up? I mean, for startups, it's pretty common that we have Zoom and Google Meet, but not every company is so far developed. So, what do you think about this?
I think post pandemic that became a bit the norm. Like companies had to go on this massive transformation to be able to enable the technology for folks to work from anywhere, mostly from home, but given the situation, but from anywhere. We obviously invest heavily on the setup. We invest heavily on the systems that we have to enable remote work and efficient remote work, like Notion for documentation. We are super heavy on documentation, on documenting everything that we do, because one of the critical aspects for us to enable remote work is working asynchronously. So we avoid as much as possible the need for synchronous meetings. We are not absolutists, so there is a value in having folks sometimes in the same conversation. Not many, but some in a live conversation to not only to connect, to socialize, but also to quickly resolve some challenges, but always supported by documentation.
Okay, do you even record meetings, or do you say okay, so always, or do you say let's say not? So for me, it could be interesting about the technical setup which is needed more or less, and what would be your best practice advice regarding this? What are the best way to handle that and to keep all people on board?
Yeah, technical setup. We share a very powerful computer to everyone. You shouldn't be held by your computer screen so that your eyes don't die after 8 hours of work. And a good camera setup with a very good built-in microphone. This is the minimum setup we do. Some other folks invest a bit more and go into fancy microphones or headphones, but the minimum we do is a good camera, a good microphone, and so that we can have efficient meetings. Or when you are recording a Loom, for example, for async work, it's clear and you can hear folks easily. We ship this globally, which is a massive challenge, but we have someone that is super, super good doing so. But even for any company, it presents challenges. Some countries require local entities just for you to be able to ship local setups. So even that is a challenge, but we are overcoming that.
That's good. Makes totally sense, and I mean, but I mean, for a lot of companies, this was a struggle. They only have one setup, especially for hybrid working. If to make hybrid working at least accessible, it's a lot of companies struggle with how to deal with this and what kind of setup is needed. And of course, on the other hand, this is of course a matter of costs and how to keep it up. But it's very important to keep an eye on the quality of the working material all the people have, and that they are connected to that in the end. So that's I think that's another very, very important topic. Yeah, and then we always said, okay, with the rituals, with all those, how do we maintain all the people within the company culture? I mean, that's one very important thing. But on the other hand, there are some hard facts. So how to keep them attracted, and especially when it comes to bonuses or benefits, how do you handle this? So there was another question raised by FT, very, very good. Thank you very much. So how to deal with salary discrepancies all over the world, and how to ensure that no one is felt like left behind or being treated unfair. So how do you ensure this to keep it transparent then?
Well, yeah, definitely this is a challenge. I was just speaking about that with my HR guy 1 hour ago. Actually, what we are doing, since it's mainly for tech people, the market becomes more and more global. It's not 100% true, but it becomes more and more global. You won't find a guy 10 times cheaper because it's a very low GDP per capita country. You won't find such a thing for a skilled guy. So at the end, it's a kind of common range. Once that's said, depending on the status of the guy, many things can change. When you hire an employee, you may talk about the gross salary, and you're going to have to pay social charges above that. And when you are hiring a freelancer for a foreign country, you may pay an invoice, and it's all cost. There is nothing more. So you try to find a way to balance that. And you cannot enter in all different social benefits, social charges set up in every country, and how it goes for the income tax for this guy in his situation. If you enter in that, you will hire 10, 20 people in the HR team, and you won't get out of it. So what we did, which is a thumb rule, which may be wrong, but at least we use that. We say, okay, when we compare two guys, one which is an employee in a country where we have an entity where we are going to pay social charges and so on, compared to a guy who will be as a freelance, just invoicing us, we say, okay, we divide the invoice amount by 1.2, and then we say it's comparable to a gross salary of a guy who is hired as an employee. So we have a kind of equal footing, which will be 100% of the time wrong, of course, because it's always different. But at least we have this kind of thumb rule to get some kind of comparison between different status of the people who are working for Heetch.
We do it slightly in a slightly more detailed way, especially on the global comp side. We actually Remote just published our total rewards policy, so it's quite useful for a lot of folks hiring remotely, how we are doing and how we are designing things. So we opted for geo-paid ranges. So we group countries with similar characteristics so that we can pay fairly, but also above what in-country rate would be. We take an approach of going with the 65th percentile to the market, so we are more competitive than the 50th percentile on that market, and from the work that we did going all over this, and we had folks dedicated in the firm to do this, it seems to be today the fairest way of compensating folks in different regions of the world. And in a fair way. We also have a minimum global wage of $40,000. So independently of where you are, we are true to our mission that we really want folks to be better off financially. So we also have this minimum limitation on the wage that we do globally, which is very exciting.
That's also to hear that, especially that takes up the question. So would you downgrade people once they want to move, for example? So when they're in Germany, the local salary is of course much higher. Would you then say, okay, when this person moves to India or Bali, where the average compensation is lower, would you adjust it, or do you do this, or do you say no? That's the same person. He's doing the same business and doing the same service for us, so he still gets the same salary paid out. How do you handle this?
It needs to be equitable to other colleagues and peers. So we would obviously look what are the circumstances of the move, if it's a short-term move or if it's a long-term move, and the personal circumstances as well, like why is someone leaving something behind so that they can address something in a different region of the world for family reasons. But again, we would focus on the GeoPay range for that region, and try to work with the individual to be fair, not only for them but for colleagues and the rest of the firm.
Great, Joel.
No, yes, we have something more. Yes, definitely more simple than me. But since we are working with tech people, I just had one example of one guy working in South Africa who decided to move to France for security reasons. But yes, we just converted his package he had in South Africa as a freelance into a French employee, and in a way he couldn't lose other net income. And that's it. But we do not have a lot of those. People usually, when they work remotely, it's because they are from this country, in this country, they want to live there, and they are happy with the paycheck, and they don't want to move to another country. So we do not have very often this kind of move from a country to another.
Mm-hmm. I mean, okay, of course it happens, but I would say it's not always the case. But I think it's the approach by Pedro is fine, and of course not in each company we have this unusual situation and having 6 or 20 countries open up. But nevertheless, it's good to have a rule of thumb on the one hand, which you presented, Julian, and of course a much more precise way how to deal with it. And even this minimum wage globally is of course a very good idea from my point of view, keeping it transparent and fair, and very good point. Yeah, great. Then I would say there are already a lot of votes for one very, very important question, which more or less I would think all of our CFOs, we are all dealing with this and have the question about how to ensure tax compliant processes. So came up for claimants and is already voted up drastically. It's of course, we all have this struggle. We have this one employee who wants to I want to work in France now. Okay, great. But then we need to build a permanent establishment. This costs us a lot of money and organizational and administration effort, and how to deal with it, and how to ensure that all the processes are aligned with this according to a minimum wage on the one hand, on the other hand, all the tax compliancy within all the structures. That is, of course, one of the main problems we are facing usually.
Well, I think
yeah, remote, right?
Well,
we have remote.
I think this is going to be a long answer.
Of course.
No, no. Short story. Look, that's one of the key reasons why Remote as a company exists. It's exactly to help companies to hire anyone, anywhere, compliantly, and the ways for you to ensure tax compliance and PE. There's always different circumstances and needs to be addressed one by one. But in most of the roles, just because you have someone in a country, they may not unlock PE if you hire through an employer of record, for example, like Remote. In other circumstances, depending on the individual, you can actually still have permanent establishment exposure, and opening your local entity may be the best option. But most cases, and to accelerate your global footprint for you to be able to address the needs of your teams, going with the employer of records, it's a very easy way for you to move internationally without having to go into crazy tax compliance procedures and building teams and 10, 20 folks just to maintain a couple of entities across the world.
Julien, do you see a...
No, good question, of course. Actually, when it comes to what we are doing at Heetch, as I said, actually we are hiring people where they are and where they want to live. And then there are two options. Or we already have an entity running in that country, so we make them employee of that entity because we can do it. Or we do not have an entity in the country, so we cannot have them as an employee. And so we propose them to be as a freelancer. So what they are, it means they are self-employed in their country, invoicing another company, which is in France, our mother company. And they are working for the worldwide product of Heetch, and that's all. So in our case, we do not have this kind of permanent establishment because we are not doing anything at the business in the country where the guy is. We are not launching a new activity in a new country and then being in the gray zone of the beginning. We are not doing that. So we do not have this kind of risk. But still, there are some risks. For example, when you go to more fancy countries, I would say, you have to ensure that the guy you're dealing with has a valid tax residency in his country. Otherwise, you may have withholding tax applying, at least in the tax French legal framework. So even if in our case, which may look more simpler, I would say, you still have mousetraps you have to check. So check the guy has, for example, a valid tax residency in his country and is not just sending you fake invoices just to pay no tax in his country.
Julian, sorry to jump in, but I think you have a risk issue there, to be honest, because those freelancers can be misqualified as employees in most of the countries.
Yes.
And it's not any individual that is a freelancer that does not expose you to PE. So there are individuals with certain roles in a firm that they can trigger PE. So it's not any freelance or any contractor that it's okay. There are thresholds also that you can be considered an employer in the country. So folks that are hearing this, this needs to be properly risk assessed, and it's not as light as hiring someone as a contractor, because that was exactly what originated the challenges that Remote is solving, and you have local tax authorities and governments increasingly protecting freelancers, increasingly protecting these gig economy workers, and putting a lot more restrictions into misqualification and how do you consider contractors as employees.
Yes, when I first came in at Heetch, when I saw so many freelancers which were considered as employees, of course, as I said you since the beginning, if we could have them as employees, we took them as employees, but we couldn't, so we didn't. Well, when I look at the risk from French social authority point of view, actually they went in our headquarters and checked that and said, okay, I have nothing to do with that as a French social authority. But my guess is maybe a foreign social authority may have something to say, saying, okay, but this guy is not a freelancer. We should consider he's an employee of yours, even if you are not my local entity, but a French entity. I definitely agree with you. We may have a risk there. And the thing is, actually, we had no problem since the beginning, 6-8 years in dozens of countries. We did that. I get the risk exists, but I guess also that the social authorities, they may have bigger problems to tackle. They may be not in their radar because it's a guy working from home, doing regular invoices. So yeah, there is a risk, but I guess the cost to patch that risk would be much higher, and the materiality of the risk for now, who knows for the future, but it's not yet there in the way we do it. For now.
So I mean, in the end, you always have two possibilities, right? You have the topic to when you want to start a new country. We have the one possibility. You have the entity already there. You have an employer of record, of course, which you could take into the middle, or the other one is you set up a permanent establishment, which is more or less automatically created, and is. But once you are, it is at least fictional there, and you need to deal with it, and you need to ensure that everything is fine. So once you have someone working there, I mean, there are different perspectives. On the one hand, you have the social securities, which you already pointed this out. Then you have the tax topics, and then you have, of course, all the other compliance topics around that. So, and then you have a lot of scenarios which are coming up. For example, one person is located in Netherlands, working in Germany, or is located in Germany, working in France, and so on. And then they are commuting everywhere around. I mean, within the EU, it's not a big deal. There was one question around that we have from Philip. So I mean, there we have the A1 certificate. But on the other hand, we have countries outside of the EU, and how to deal with this. I mean, even if we look into Europe, we have this situation sometimes. So when we talk about UK now, coming up with completely uncertainty what is going on there, even Norway or Switzerland, even though there are some other agreements and government agreements across the borders. But when it comes a little bit more fancy or not so directly within Europe, then it's getting more complicated. So, and there was another question around like, that we maybe take some countries out of there which are maybe a little bit more easy to jump in, for example, or maybe you could share your insights. What are countries which are easy to apply to, and which are the hardest ones, a little bit? So from your experience, and I would like to combine those two questions. It was a little open stated the question, like, could you please talk a bit more around compliance in various countries? I would think it is good to talk about the most recent countries, or the most choose countries, and how do we deal there with the different topics? I mean, this is a little bit combined to the other one, because I would assume we talk about third country, so countries which are not from the European Union. So maybe starting with what are countries which are easy to apply to, and what kind of certificates maybe are very important, especially when you have struggles within. You need to you need people within product and engineering. What are the main countries at the moment which you need to certify for, and what are the main issues you're running into there?
You have a lot of countries these days promoting this remote work scenery, and countries like Barbados, where you have a 1-year visa that you can apply for, and you pay a few grand and you can work locally. But there's also a conscious need of skilled workers. So there is increasingly more mobility options in the countries to hire these highly technical individuals. When you're not so, it's harder, and you need to follow the standard visa and immigration procedures, which we all know it's extremely painful. But if you are in a particular subset of highly skilled workers, there are options, and it's a matter of also understanding which countries are in need of those type of skills, so that we can promote and enable folks to move.
Would you say that there kind of a top 3 or top 5 countries which are coming up usually, especially for certain levels, and which are they hard to apply to?
You always have the US, which varies, and you have a lot of folks. I think it's a bit less so these days, but until 2 years ago, it was super hot, especially in the space that we operate. It was super hot, but also in Europe, you have Netherlands as a key country, UK as well, Spain. We see a lot of folks moving in. But all of these are not easy countries to move to, and you have specific immigration considerations. But for skilled workers, tends to be slightly more easier.
Mm-hmm. So when you talk about that, not only immigrating, but already just you need you're forced as a company to set up so you have a lack of talents within, for example, within sales. So and you need now to deal with, okay, which kind of country, which could be where on the one hand I have good talents available. On the other hand, the compliance rules are not so heavily. I do not need to invest too drastically and to be 100% compliant. So, are there some patterns which you say, okay, yeah, we have some kind of countries which are often there and which are easy to apply to?
That would be a different topic, which is which countries can you start operating faster or more easily.
Exactly.
More than less than having folks moving locally. But most of European countries tend to be relatively easy. US as well, as long as you can have local folks working there. These are countries very pro-business, so operations can be set up with implications more or less easily.
Okay. Are there any countries where you say, okay, that's simply not possible, just don't think about it anymore at any time?
There are some more peculiar countries. Brazil, for example, is a country which is relatively close to international operations, and it's a hard setup. There's a lot of local tax, especially tax legislation, that you need to be very mindful of, and but also it's a great pool of talent. So
especially from the developer side, right? Yeah.
So it's can you justify the return of opening locally and getting a lot of your capital stuck in the country.
Mm-hmm. So there's a problem of getting the money out of there again. So
as well.
Yeah, okay, understood. Jean, do you have any experience around that? So where you say, okay, in this country it was easy to do, in this country, oh no, that was a big struggle. And what was maybe a best practice advice regarding that?
Well, as I said, we didn't face that because we take some kind of shortcut, Pedro would say. So no, the thing is, since we asked the guy to just invoice us as a freelance, from my headquarter point of view, I just received an invoice from a foreign country, and we had from Nigeria, Zambia, South Africa, and Belarus, and many countries we can be looked at unusual. The only big thing we had to check was non-double taxation treaty between our mother country, France, and the other countries. And for example, I discovered there was no one between France and Colombia, but I discovered it too late. Well, actually it exists, but it hasn't been ratified by the Colombian parliament, so it's not valid. So I get screwed with that. So you have a special taxation, called withholding tax when we receive invoices from those countries. So you will have to go there and to dig in this documentation, which is not always easy, just to see if it's okay, if you're on the safe side for this withholding tax or not. So well, at the end, it's for me, on an administrative point of view, each time we find a new guy in a fancy country, I just go and dig on the administrative stuff to say if there is an obvious reason not to go with them, or it looks okay, and I say, okay, let's take the risk.
Mm-hmm. So like a rule of thumb, that sounds good. I think it's important because in the end, governments are not so fast developing as economics, and so we are facing it in Germany. For example, there is no clear governmental rule how to deal with people working completely abroad, for example, but still being employed within Germany. So especially even working on workation, something like that. Even this is not regulated so far. How to deal with it, even from an insurance perspective and so on. And I think that it's important to always say, okay, to find a way in the middle. Between being 100% compliant on the one hand, but still keeping the costs and an eye on the costs. Even though it's pretty fuzzy and it's not 100% well developed so far because of missing regulations partially. Yeah, maybe then I already stick it in. We are close to the end, so I just pick up some questions randomly now. And one question coming up by Kate. Thank you very much. So how do you best enable learning on the job through remote working? By the way, do we have another question which is more or less related to that? So regarding how important is documentation? I think this is one. The one is the solution for the other one a little bit, so it's kind of combined to each other. But how do you ensure that? So but there's only one thing. Okay, you documentate all the stuff you do, but on the other hand, on the job. So documentation is not precisely on the job. So how do you get it done?
Well, Pedro already answered a lot about that, and we do more or less the same. We have a very extensive use of Notion, which is of course a very good thing for documentation and also for collaboration. Every guy can put his remark and ping someone about a specific line in the document and so on. So it's very, very useful to have a deep collaboration on very detailed stuff, because when you're a tech company, you cannot say, yes, it's going to work. No, you have to go deep into detail to be sure we saw every edge case and so on. So we have a very extensive usage of Notion for that. And we use many other tools for good collaboration. Of course, all the Google Suite is something very useful about, could be Google Sheet, Google Doc, Google Slide, and so on. We are using them a lot. It's basic, but it's very, very efficient. And we are also using Miro to have this kind of schemes and so on to work on together. So the only thing which is harder to do with remote people is really like a whiteboard brainstorming out of nowhere. This is really harder to do remotely, but for the rest of it, for the collaboration, for the sharing of knowledge, there is plenty of tools which are very, very well done for doing so.
Important is this tool stack, yeah, Pedro?
Yeah, it's what we mentioned before on documentation. You need to only think that are new joiners and that need to ramp up quickly to where you are today. We are also we have teams dedicated to enabling some of their folks, like sales enablement and customer experience as well. A lot of investment in the knowledge center on the customer experience side as well. But we are also in the process of launching a learning management system, so we can start preparing formal trainings to the different departments and the different roles that we have in the firm, so that we can ensure that at least the minimum set of information that we need folks to understand and to grasp, it's available in a nice manner.
Great.
And maybe I could add something which is partly related to that, which can seem so obvious, but we saw that very, very precisely. So we have an organization for our engineers, our developers, where we have one engineering manager managing maybe 10 to 15 engineers who can be junior, intermediate, or some senior. And definitely after 3 or 6 months where we have a void position in an engineering manager, we had a very high churn in the team. And much higher what you can have in a local team when you see people in the office. Because, this day-to-day link with your manager, talking about what you're doing, how you're achieving goals and so on. If you have no more people or less people, less relationship, then it's very critical to retain people. And I guess it may be linked for juniors. Juniors, they are learning with their boss, with their peers when they are remote. And if there is not this link for a couple of months, then it's very, very critical to retain people.
Very good. And very good points here. So thank you very much. That's good. Awesome. And then I know there's one more open question that's interesting, coming from Susanna. What are your thoughts on enabling transparency without people feeling controlled or checked on? I mean, I could assume that's linked to tracking working time on the one hand, and ensure that everyone is knows what the other person is doing. Do you have issues with this, or do you experience issues with those kind of questions, or coming up with people who had problems with those?
Yeah, some folks don't feel super comfortable sharing in public forums or posting what they are working on publicly. But I think that also comes from the values of the company, and if you build an environment of trust more than anything else. And thankfully, we've been managing to do that, and we never fell into the trap of am I being checked or I'm being controlled the hours that I'm working, but much more on the contributions that you bring, the projects that you own, and the deliverables that you have to achieve.
I definitely agree with Pedro, and it's not just words. What I see here at Heetch is that, and since the beginning, it has been striking to me that when there is a bug, when there is an outage, when there is, a big failure, not something important. And the thing is not, we are not looking who is to blame. We are just talking about that, saying, okay, it's a pity. We are going to work together so it won't happen again. And this is for real. This is not just a fake word. It's for real. We are not looking who is to blame for. We are just looking how to make it better next time. And everybody is happy to help. And it's really part of the culture. And it's very important, I guess.
That's great. And by the way, we are already done within the time. So, and I think that's a great ending point, because it brings us to how important it is to integrate a great culture within the company to ensure to build the remote team. So it's all about rituals. It's all about being transparent on the one hand, but still transport that the vision is that's clear, and you want to keep all the people connected. We have touched a lot of points, and I just want to say thank you very much. So for all the attendees, and of course Pedro and Julian, thank you very much for granting insights and how do you deal with how to maintain the people connected and how to deal with tax compliances. We touched base on that topics. So we have different possibilities here, and of course always one possibility is to connect with remote.com or with a pair of work, thank you very much, and see you next time, and enjoy the rest of CFO Connect.
Thank you both.
Thanks to all of you. Thanks, Roman.
Bye.